Now, this video series is specifically on religious abuse, but it's common when people are experiencing what they call church hurt. It's common for them to be confused as to whether or not this is abuse or church hurt. And so I found it to be really helpful to differentiate the two. So this video is going to just give you like a pretty thorough understanding of what the difference between church hurt and spiritual or religious abuse are. Because in navigating your own story, your own situation, I think it's really important to know whether you're experiencing church hurt or religious spiritual abuse. Church hurt is something that actually the New Testament promises us we're going to experience. And so there's a way forward into that, and there's a mindset to that that's important that we understand and that we take it biblically. Religious and spiritual abuse is also something that we're going to experience, but the Bible does not condone it at all. The Bible has really nothing but bad to say about that. There's no place for religious abuse or spiritual abuse. So I'm going to tell you the difference between the two, because if what you're experiencing is church hurt, then chances are the Lord is probably going to lead you through it in some way. If what you're experiencing is religious or spiritual abuse, there's a different approach I think that he would have you take to that. And in both cases, it's important to know sort of what the enemy is up to and how he is using it or trying to use it against you and against God. Let's first define sort of what constitutes church hurt and what it's like, some of the markers for church hurt. When you read the New Testament, you hear Paul saying things like, bear with one another in love, consider others better than yourselves, forgive, strive for the peace. That's because he anticipates there's going to be this sort of thing. And what we call church hurt, typically I think of as the sort of thing that happens in a family. It's the kinds of things that are inevitable when you put a group of people that are different and sinful in the same four walls for a length of time, where they're having to form some kind of common group identity, and yet there's difficulties coming up. We don't all agree on how things should go. People say things they shouldn't. People are ignorant. They're weak. And so that's what we're calling church hurt. And so let me just give you some of my notes on what I've observed about church hurt. First of all, church hurt is most often caused by human weakness, which we're going to find in a minute is different than spiritual or religious abuse, which is caused by human power. Okay, so church hurt is the result of normal human weakness that is to be expected. It's inevitable, right? Such things as human sin, fragility, just how fragile we are, how sensitive we are, our limitations. We get tired, we get hungry, we go broke, we run out of time. Those sorts of limitations. Sometimes people have a lack of wisdom, and that's a weakness. Sometimes people are selfish, and that's a weakness, or even immature, and that can be a weakness. And so these are human weaknesses that show up when we get together as a family and try to do life together. And they're inevitable, and we all have them. And that can cause pain. In fact, it does, and it will cause pain, just like it does in your family. In church hurt, the pain doesn't always come from leaders, which when we talk about abuse, you'll find it always comes from leaders. But you can be hurt in a family setting by a brother or a sister as well, or even by a child. The book of 1 Samuel, I understand, is Old Testament, and it's not talking about the church. We can also see in the book of 1 Samuel how God interacts with power and leadership, and also how the enemy interacts with it. And so I've just found 1 Samuel to be a really helpful book of the Bible as I've navigated some of the like deeper dynamics of what happens in church hurt as well as spiritual abuse. So Samuel is the first leader in this book, and he is held up as really the greatest leader that Israel's had up to this point. And so let me just take you through some of the things that that this book of the Bible tells us about Samuel, and I'll make some points about how it relates to church hurt. In chapter 7 of 1 Samuel, we read, Samuel continued as Israel's leader all the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also held court for Israel. And he built an altar there to the Lord. These verses really highlight the kind of leader that Samuel was. He was a very self-sacrificing leader. He went above and beyond for the people of God. See, Samuel was a judge, and typically the judges in that time would sit in the city gates of their city, and they would hear out the people and their concerns, and they would discern and help just keep order in the community. And so they were providing a very important service that was really a ministry. It's a lot of what a pastor does, to be honest, is just helping people navigate life together. Most judges, like I said, would stay in their own hometown and people would come to them. But this tells us that Samuel was actually going on a circuit. He was, if you look on a map, he was traveling by foot, like quite a distance, in order to reach people and provide them with this ministry. He was almost like a missionary. He was almost like Paul, where he was going from town to town and bringing the ministry of being a judge to these people. He was a really devoted leader. And devoted leaders often are the ones that experience church hurt the worst. That will be informative later when we talk about abuse, because if a leader is experiencing hurt or rejection, sometimes the enemy can grab hold of that and lead them into power. But here we see Samuel just really giving of himself and pouring himself out. If you read in chapter 8, it says, when Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. But his sons did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, you are old and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. God is saying, don't take this personally. Don't leave. Don't give up. Don't walk away. This is actually a problem that the people have with me, God says. A couple chapters later in chapter 12, Samuel says, do not be afraid. You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. As for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. And I will teach you the way that is good and right. But be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart. Consider what great things he has done for you. Yet if you persist in doing evil, both you and your king will perish. Now, what does this all have to do with church hurt? Well, first of all, I just want you to see that being in the people of God is messy. People are sinful. As I said before, there's so many weaknesses here. Samuel's feeling rejected. He has poured himself out, which really does set you up to feel rejected and abandoned when people want to move on, when you're spent and you're old and you have nothing left to give. It can be hurtful. And the people are forgetting about God. Samuel's sons are in some sort of, evil, and yet, with all of this, God is saying, hang on. He's saying, hang on to everybody. He's saying, hang on, Samuel. Hang on, Israel. Hang on to me. I have a plan. And look at how Samuel, in spite of all of his weakness, responds with maturity. He's like, I will hang on. And he even hangs on to the people that he feels rejected by telling them, I am not going to stop praying for you. I am hanging on to God, to the Lord, and the Lord would have me to continue to pray for you until I am dead and gone. So that is what I'm going to do. And then he gives them a warning. He's continuing to shepherd them and give them the way forward as the people of God. So this is a really great example of what it's like to be in church, even though this isn't church. This is what it's like to be in a family that's father is God. It's messy and it's confusing at times, and people get hurt. But God tells us to hang on. Now, this next little part of the story is going to move us into Saul's part of the story, but I want you to keep your eyes on Samuel because we're looking at the experience that we often have when we are engaging relentlessly the people of God and the plan of God in spite of all this human weakness. So if we look forward in 1 Samuel chapter 15, this is where Saul actually loses the blessing of God for his kingship. But again, keep your eye on Samuel as I read this. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. I have regret that I have made Saul king because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. Saul is now departed from God. So this is now like Saul is in a different kind of situation than just regular church hurt. He's actually going to start to become an abuser. And so this puts Samuel in a different sort of relationship with Saul, because Saul is not just operating out of human weakness anymore. He's actually going to start operating out of an agreement with demonic power. But again, keep your eye on Samuel. It says Samuel was angry and he cried out to the Lord all that night. If you've ever been in ministry, you know how this feels. You feel when leaders depart from God and they start to become abusers, you feel betrayed. But Samuel is still in the flock. He's still one of God's people. And so he's having to navigate this with Saul. So watch how God and Samuel interact. It says, then Samuel left for Ramah. Remember, that's his hometown. But Saul went up to his home in Gibeah of Saul. Until the day Samuel died, he did not go to see Saul again, though Samuel mourned for him. And the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. Samuel has the maturity and the presence of mind to know, like, it is time for me to part ways with this guy. But there's something in his heart that's continuing to mourn and grieve for this loss. And that is typical church hurt. Even when there is spiritual abuse going on, there's church hurt going on too. There's family hurt going on. Samuel anointed this young man as king, and he was his mentor. And now this young man, this king, is departing from the Lord, and Samuel's going to stay with the Lord. He's going to have to depart from Saul. This is what God says. He says to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king. But Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me. Samuel is still in the game with God. He has not given up on the people of God. He has not given up on this course that God is taking to anoint a king over Israel. But Samuel's heart is still attached to Saul. This gives us like a major principle in navigating this sort of thing. So in order to navigate this well, we have to stay with God. And what spiritual abuse often does, and what the enemy's goal for it is to separate you from God, it's to make you doubt God. Since these are the people of God and these are the leaders of God who bear God's name, there must be something really off about God that I can't trust, because look how they're acting. And the point of Samuel's story is no, stay with God. He is the only one that can see straight to the middle of someone's heart, and he's the only one that can help you safely navigate all of this pain. The enemy is always going to try to use pain and injustice to lead us away from God. But God has a purpose for us when he calls us into family, and he knows there's going to be inevitable weaknesses and hurts and failures and limitations and lackings in between us. God has a purpose for all of that. And the purpose that God wants for us as we stay in our church families, his purpose is to strengthen us. So as we bear with one another over time and forgive and learn to get along with one another, we find our faith is strengthened. We will find our maturity increases, and we'll have a sharpened clarity even in our devotion to God. We start to see that he's actually the only one we all mutually trust, and our devotion and our connection and intimacy with God increases as we learn to not depend on the perfection that we expect out of one another, but rather to depend on the perfection of God that keeps us and allows us to hold together. So this video has focused on the parameters of what we might call church hurt. And we've seen that it's messy, it's complicated. Being part of the family of God is not a simple task. It's going to refine you, and it's going to demand greater maturity, greater faith, greater devotion to God on your part. As I close this video on church hurt, I want to just read from Romans chapter 12. He says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone.